castellano. The same, but reverse, in the sense that, as I see it at least, the form, the fact that you are capable of claiming a politics of the personal through comics, that in my view is coming from the metropolitan center down to Chile, is in tension with the language, which is so Chilean and so not belonging to this form that is coming from abroad. The autobiographical graphic novel or the autobiographical comic with a gender bent, but in Chilean. And there is that tension there, and it's a very powerful tension. Again, how do you envision an audience for that? Because in your case, additionally, you are dealing, when you are publishing in the clinic, but in general in comics in Chile, you're dealing with a particularly masculinist imagination of what is already a masculinist genre, the comic. And you're making an intervention there. So how do you envision publics, and what are the real publics?
Well, very quickly, I'm glad you caught that, because not too many people have asked me that. It's really nice, but that is one thing that I purposely did. Again, it goes back to working in animation and my feelings of everything's been overdrawn. Everything has been overthought to the point where you look at a movie now and there is just nothing left to your imagination, not even the background, because that's in perfect focus in high definition. So you can't even imagine what that background could have been. And that's the standard, and there's nothing you and I could do about it. When I worked on this book, I had just finished reading Robert Flagel's The Odyssey. So I was just in love with this language, the heroic language. And you can see it. It's all over the place. And in a way, this was kind of like, how would I illustrate The Odyssey? If I was going to illustrate this, Rockwell Kent style or whatever. And one of the things that I played around with was this kind of feeling that I'm going to have complicated dialogue, very simple drawings to the point where I'm going to take out lines instead of add them in. Why? Because no personal reason. I guess I wanted to piss people off. I just, again, it was just this kind of standard that, you look at Superman, who came out with these tiny little squinty eyes in 1930, which he never opened. And he was just this wonderful, iconic, simple mass. He didn't even have muscle, he just had this wonderful mass. And it was beautiful. And now look at him now. I mean, he's full of rubber, and there's stuff flying in and veins, and and it's like, do we really need to see that all the time? So I constructed everything so that you could just pay attention and read it on two different levels. Now, what the audience is, I wrote this for myself. I was cracking up when I was writing all this stuff. But I think there's always been a reaction from a slightly older audience. And you're right. Probably some curmudgeon that lives in a cave that has not, has this massive comic book collection, and he's thinking, yeah, man, this is really cool. So that one guy, that's my guy, Aside from that, that's all like my weekend. That's all you need. That's all you need.
Here we are.
Yeah, so that's it.
Okay, now my turn. I'm always you talk about being in a man's land, like the public that is mainly men. That is I'm used to it because when I began to paint, my first show was a group show where everybody was men and me. So that happened many times. And when I began to buy comics in United States and in Europe, most of the comics were done for men. Like there are very few done by women. And so I always thought that that was great because being less is not powerful. You have a tribune that is better and they pay more attention to you. And it doesn't matter if it's good or bad, but you're a woman, so it's not that common. So that played for me very good. I like to be in that position, to be the only woman that do this. That's great. It works for me. But the other thing you said about what was the other thing you said?
In fact, if I may, the other part is the one that interests me the most in you. It was the formal tension reverted in the case, because the genre formally comes down to you, as I say it at least, from the north.
Yeah.
But it's the language that creates the tension that I saw manifesting in Frank in a different way in Roqueto, because the language is so Chilean and it's so new and it's so great to see it in Chilean Spanish or in Chilean, if you will. And to me, the energy of your comics comes from precisely that friction, that encounter between a form that is coming from without and a language that has never manifested from within, because sex is not something we talk.
Yeah.
And decent people who read, do not talk like that, do not refer to vaginas and penis and whatever.
Yeah.
That was the part of the question I was interested in. Is how do you see that friction between form and language?
I see that it's very funny for me to do it, and I think people thanks to that. I mean, they are very thankful to read comic with language that is like colloquial and it's like normal and it's not literature either, and it's not vulgar. I don't use bad words, not because I don't want to use bad words, because I never use them. Like I don't use them very much. And I wanted to be very honest, and I wanted to do to write things that are true, and write as I talk normally, and that many people say to me that that's the best thing in the comic, like yeah, the drawings are good and everything, but and this book, if you see it, I wrote a lot, more than I draw, so. Because I think I love to read, and when I live in New York, I read a lot because I took the subway and I live in Washington Heights. And then I had to take the A train, and that's a long way, So I read, and I learned to read in English, and I read novels, like many of them, and I love them. And I never read the comics. That's something that I think that we're a little boring. But I love the drawings, and I love the way they, design the pages. Kim Deitch, I love Kim Deitch. Many different artists. I didn't read comics for many years, and I bought them anyway. But I read books. I read novels. My father is a writer also, and he has published books. And I read a lot, and I like to know what's the new book. So I think I wanted to write, but I never write a script before. I think I have to keep it fresh, For this book, I didn't do any sketch. I just did it. It's experiment. It's not that I'm going to do everything like this, but the experiment was like just have the page and just do it, and that's it. I never read anything or never came back because I had 3 months. In 3 months you can do